Hello, and welcome to our first real episode of Taking the Stand, a podcast show about liberty and law and freedom and fighting, whatever alliteration works for you. I'm Hermann. I am the director of the Freedom Advocacy Network, and I host Taking the Stand, where we bring you our weekly dose of a legal update on the fight going on for liberty. And joining me is Ben Kun, a crucial member of the Fan Justice Project team. Ben, thank you very much for joining.
How's it, Herman? How are you doing?
Well, I must say I have just come out of load shedding. We shouldn't call it load shedding. We should call it what it is. It's rolling blackout. So I've just come out of a rolling blackout. I'm glad to be online. Frankly, I don't know how people before electricity did it. I should probably just, ask my parents perhaps. No, I'm kidding. They're not that old. Right. So for our audience at home, the Fan Justice Project is about making the law about protecting your freedoms and using whatever means we can to make it about your freedom and really to change the courts into an arena for the battle of ideas, to make sure that we don't just put up with bad law when it is made, but we challenge it, we call it out, and we don't always expect to win. That's an important thing to realize. We don't always expect to win these court cases, but winning isn't always the point. Now, that might be self-defeating if you're in a conflict situation, but the real thing that we must realize, and research shows this time and time again, that the courts of law are downstream from public opinion. So if you can use the courts of law to influence public opinion, you create this healthy feedback loop of freedom mattering to those people who make and interpret law. So, Ben, let's get started. In the few weeks that the Fan Justice Project has been active, we've done a few things, started a few, legal skirmishes. If you had to pick one that you think really merits a bit of a discussion, a bit of a mention, what would you go for?
Sure. So we've got a couple of very cool ones. We wrote a letter to SAHPRA about the vaccines, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But one that I was more intimately involved in was the PostNet matter, which involves the post office wanting a monopoly on all parcels or packages of 1 kilogram or less. So what I had to do for that was I had to analyze a ruling made by ICASA, which is an Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. And they're basically just a regulatory oversight body. And the PostNet took the post office to court on that with regards to the one kilogram rule. And ICASA found that the post office has a monopoly on all packages of less than 1 kilogram or 1 kilogram or less. Now, luckily, the PostNet managed to get an interdict on that ruling. So they are still allowed to deliver packages of 1 kilogram or less in the meantime, before it goes to the High Court. But what we did is we saw that this could be very, very sort of dangerous. There's a lot of important things that get delivered of 1 kilogram or less, like medicine, sort of little devices that are very important for everyday functioning in work, especially with everyone working from home. So we wrote to all the interested parties. So the interested parties would be all the Korean companies. So not just PostNet, because this ruling would affect all of them. And we basically said that we would like to join the proceedings when it goes to the Gauteng High Court, which it is scheduled to do sometime this year. And we would like to be an amicus curiae. So that's a Latin phrase for friend of the court. And what that would allow us to do is go to court and take forward some of our arguments and let them play out in court. So a lot of freedom arguments, competition arguments, and yeah, so that's what we decided to do there. And we've written to all the interested parties, and we're waiting to hear back from them.
Yeah, I think that's such a good summation of what this issue is about, and also perhaps we can stand still for a moment on this idea of an amicus curiae, or a friend of the court. It's a very interesting, legal thing to do, because usually in a court of law, you've got the two parties. In most cases that FAN will be getting involved in, you've got the applicant and the respondent, and you also in other cases you've got I think the plaintiff and the defendant. My disadvantage is that I studied these things in Afrikaans, so sometimes I just need to remember what is this English terminology thing. But so you've got these two opposing sides in a court case, but a friend of the court joins legal procedure, and you must help me right if my legal knowledge is a bit rusty here, joins the procedure, not specifically on one side or the other, but it's a friend of the court. So it's there to guide the court's judgment, to help the court make up its mind in this dispute.
No, it's quite correct. We don't choose a side. We choose an argument when you join as amicus curiae. So we want to put forward an argument that we believe in. So we argue and advocate for freedom at FAN. So we would look for an avenue, an argument to do that, and that's what we would go and do. We're not siding with one of the parties. We basically trying to get the best law judged on in the courts, is my understanding of the amicus curiae.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. So either we're both right or we're both wrong. I'm sure we'll find out at some point. But when it comes to freedom, one thing that was quite interesting for me when we researched and considered the legal strategy for joining as a friend of the court, because at FAN, at part of the Justice Project is, it's in the name, freedom. How is freedom affected by a specific case? And I must say, one thing that stood out for me from this situation is perhaps a bit of an obscure point, and I hope we get to argue it in court. It's that rules like these, that the post office, which is an SOE aligned with government, can use its statutory and perhaps government hard power or soft power to establish a monopoly on things, is quite economically exclusionary. If you're a young guy in a suburb or a township and you think, the job market sucks, but I've got a driving license, I've got an entrepreneurial spirit, I know people need to get stuff delivered to them, let me start a small scale courier. This sort of ruling, am I right, it excludes people from this sort of economic opportunity that might not be attractive to everyone, but it's making it more difficult to become economically free, as it were.
Yeah, no, that's completely correct, especially in a country like ours where, there aren't a lot of job opportunities. They're not falling out of the sky. So if you are innovative like that and you think, sure, there's a gap in the market here, maybe I can do this to earn a bit of a living. There's red tape around that, and this court ruling would really not allow you to do that at all. So that's a bit worrying, and it's not good for the people of this country.
I must say, it's always to me fascinating when the government, who purports to be about economic inclusion, time and time again, parts of the government or parts of the state even make policies and decisions and rules and rulings that are economically exclusionary. That's just counterproductive. We're not saying, oh, let it all go, we need no regulation, but something like this, I just think is quite a bit, it verges on the petty, it verges on the silly, and what I remember in our strategic discussions about this is thinking, my goodness, if the post office will be allowed to do this, if this sort of regulation is entrenched in law by a court judgment, it sort of lays the precedent for stuff like, what's the relationship between SABC and Netflix? Will the SABC be able to use this legal precedent, this level of power, to start manipulating the entertainment market? So this isn't just a narrow thing. It creates a sort of it creates a precedent, creates a new way of doing things. So,
yes,
I think there might be a slight delay
for a bit there, but I got
apologies.
There's a bit of but what is quite worrying is the fact that in the South African Postal Services Act, they have created this monopoly for the post office. So if the court were to just judge on the law that it sees, it would arrive at the conclusion that the South African Post Office has a monopoly on 1 kilogram or less parcels. I mean, Vector wrote a great piece in the Daily Friend about it. So it would be very, I mean, that's where you see the role of the courts as well. So I think that's why it's important for us to be able to go there and to make these arguments to the judge, and try and hope for the best, really.
And I must say, on the note of hoping for the best, just today, we gave instructions to our legal team. You're looking at a chunk of it, but we have other colleagues and people behind the scenes acting.
More experience than me.
Yes, and myself as well. We have today given the instruction that we will file an access of information request on another monopoly that seems to be crumbling before our eyes, and that is the monopoly of Eskom. Interesting times. Oh dear, I see we only have 2 minutes left, and I need to get to the topic that sort of triggered the naming of this episode. Is someone rigging the sales of vaccines? Let me quickly run through the facts, and then I will try to do it within the next 35 seconds. So SAHPRA is the body in South Africa responsible for the approval of medication for common sale and use in South Africa. Now, we all know during this COVID period, the approval of vaccines, whether they are safe or not, has been such a crucial part of these sorts of entities across the world. But a very interesting set of facts have now developed, where Johnson & Johnson, one of the vaccine manufacturers, seems to have negotiated with SAHPRA, where SAHPRA said to Johnson & Johnson, we will allow the use and sale of your vaccine in South Africa, but, and here's where it gets dodgy, only if you just sell your vaccines to the government. Problem number one, that's not SAHPRA's role to negotiate that sort of thing. But in the last 40 seconds, it's a freedom thing again, isn't it, Ben? It's a freedom thing where people aren't being allowed to buy and sell, and you've got these corporates and state bodies sort of possibly rigging the system.
Yeah, and causing harm, really, to be honest. So yeah, that's an interesting one that we hope will materialize.
Yeah, and in the last 10 seconds, I managed this time awfully. I'll be better next time, I promise. We're also seeking to join when this thing, if it goes to the High Court, we will seek to join, FAN will seek to join as a friend of the court. And you will see a pattern emerging that wherever FAN invests our resources, gets involved, it's about freedom. It's about making sure that you, the individual citizen, is not messed around by the law, but that the law is about your freedom and not about the interests of powerful people. And with that, I'm going to land this badly managed episode. My hosting skills clearly need work, but all I can say is your freedom is worth fighting for. And join us and follow us on this podcast series and in the work we do as we fight for it. Ben, thank you very, very much. Everyone at home, we'll see you next week.
Cheers.